Hey, pool chasers. Welcome to part 4 of our 4-part filter series. The topic, I bet you guessed it, cartridge filters. Our guests today discuss the anatomy of a cartridge filter, when and how a filter clean should be performed, when the elements should be replaced, and much more. This has been a really fun week, and we hope you have learned as much as we did from this series. Please enjoy episode 129 with Frank Swindell and Mike Childress of Pentair.
Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Villafania. And this is the Pool Chasers Podcast.
All right, well, thank you guys again for coming back on the podcast with us. Can you introduce yourself and what your role at Pentair is, please?
Yes, Frank Swindell, Product Manager of Filters and Valves for the Pool Division, responsible for all products that falls in those two categories. I've been employed with Pentair since 1980.
My name is Mike Childress. I'm a regional training manager for Pentair. I'm responsible as part of the training team for developing and conducting classes on Pentair's products and electrical and hydraulic content within our training program. And I've been with Pentair since 1990.
Awesome. Thank you. We are going to talk about cartridge filters on this episode. So I want to start with a breakdown, the anatomy of the cartridge filter. Can you explain how it works?
Yes. In our previous episode, we did cover sand and we covered DE. Now we're going to talk about cartridge filters. Cartridge filter is the one filter that does not require a backwash valve because we do not backwash cartridges. We hand wash them. So basically, the anatomy of a cartridge filter, you have an inlet and an outlet. In the inlet, you want to make sure that your water doesn't come directly into the vessel and immediately hit the pleated elements of the cartridge filter. So in a sand filter, your media to filter the water is sand. DE is the powder that coats the grid. Cartridge is a non-woven media, and I mentioned, I think, episode 1, when you look at the non-woven media under a microscope, it looks like a bunch of spaghetti noodles that are just intertwined. This is sprayed out by a special machine. It's actually plastic threads that's actually sprayed out into this weave pattern, and then it's calendared where it's actually pressed flat, and then it comes in rolls of material where we then take the material, we cut it to length, and then we run it through a machine that actually pleats it into 1.5, 2-inch pleat depths. And after X number of pleats, you cut them off, you fold it back together and make a cylinder in glue and or weld those together and make a cylinder. We place a plastic core in the center of the pleated elements, and then we use epoxy resin on each end to actually hold everything together. So basically, this cartridge itself actually is the surface of that area is what filters the particles out of the water. By far, these are the filters that provide the largest area of square footage of filtration, and it gives you long run cycles, which is what makes it so popular today. So basically, the dirty water comes into the filter, it's diffused so that it doesn't hit the cartridge directly, so it fills the canister with dirty water. The dirty water then is forced through the cartridge pleated material, which catches the dirt. The clean water goes through the center and then usually passes through either back through a manifold, back through a channel, back out the other port of the filter where clean water is returned to the pool.
Awesome. Thank you. Kind of like we talked about in the other episodes, once I choose to go with the cartridge filter, how do I know which size to go with?
This is a little bit different than the other two medias because you've got so much square footage in a cartridge. When you look at what's truly needed, again, calculated like all the others, you get your body of water, you find out how many gallons per minute you need, and then you look at what filter meets that minimum requirement. 90% of your cartridge users today oversize the filter. When I say oversize, the smallest cartridge filter we currently make today is a 50 square foot cartridge. And that 50 square foot cartridge is large enough to filter most any residential pool. However, what most people do today is they upsize it and make it larger so they can go longer periods between clean cycles. So basically, they take their maintenance instead of doing it every 2 weeks, and now I do it once a month, or maybe even in some areas have small swimming pool seasons and low bather loads, they could possibly get an entire pool season out of a pool clean with an oversized filter. So again, when you start looking at the size of the filter and what's needed, mostly cartridge filters are oversized to provide long clean cycles.
Right. Yeah, it's always good to have a good size one on there, that at least for pool service companies, so it helps prolong the time between cleanings. And we always recommended kind of either a 4 to 6 month cycle on the cartridges, depending on the debris and everything around them.
Yes.
So, well, that's for a larger filter. We pretty much only have 320s and up on most of our residential pools.
If you start looking at the volumes, other than the state of Florida, which is a large cartridge market, their pools are much smaller, and they tend to go on the clean and clear model, which is a single element.
Right.
But again, they upsize it from a 50 square foot to 100 square foot, but it's only one element.
Yeah, it's an interesting market that they have a lot of single cartridges out there. When I first heard that, that was pretty intriguing to me. That it seemed like a lot of the technicians clean those on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, if you look at it, about every backyard faces one another. They all have pools. They all have screens around their pools, and they all have equipment pad that's really small in nature compared to some of the other areas.
Sure, makes sense. What's a best practice, when installing cartridge filter?
Best practice installing a cartridge filter, you want it after your pump, before your heater or any other sanitizing. You want to make sure when you're positioning it, it's easy to service, because again, this filter, you're going to have room, because you got to get the elements out of the filter housing itself to clean. So you want to make sure when you put this on an equipment pad, you've got ample room to get and service the filter itself, away from electronics and so that, because you are going to take it apart to take the elements out to have them cleaned.
In the position of it, the area around it, make sure you can get to the drain on this. A lot of people will back it up against the wall and you can't get to the drain. So it's important to be able to get to the drain so you can remove the drain cap and rinse out the tank so you can get a good clean tank. Because a lot of people will take this thing apart, not take the drain plug out, wash everything out, put it back together, and as soon as they turn it on, they get a big puff of debris right back into the pool.
Right. Yeah, that's builders, if you could put them a little bit farther away from the wall so we could get the band clamps off. That would be awesome. That's
another bad thing. They do like to put them right up against the wall. And, in our literature, we say, you got to be, we recommend you put at least 6 inches off the wall so you can get the clamp off.
Right. Let's talk about, you guys might not know, but let's talk about that drain plug real quick, because that's kind of a pain in the butt for some people cleaning those filters. There's got to be a reason that it's down below underneath, right? Is there some factor
if you look at the design of the drain itself, when you go to drain winterize, what your initial thoughts are, it needs to be at the lowest point on the filter, which this is. And you're actually talking about the Clean and Clear Plus, the FNS Plus model, because that's located right below the bulkhead fittings. Where it becomes a big issue is once you put a backwash valve. It's more of an issue of location with the FNS Plus or the DE version than it is a cartridge, because cartridge, you really don't have a lot of plumbing in the way.
Right.
It is low to the ground, so that's troublesome. Older models, it used to be just a small little plug that's screwed up in that hole, and now we've made it into more of a cap plug, so you have something you can see and grab. We also have put a little hex head on the bottom of it, so you can actually put a little socket on it, because again, there's not a lot of room. It's only probably maybe 60, 80 degrees of movement in there for the opening. That makes it a little more troublesome as well. But it's it's the lowest point to get all the water out. That's why it was placed there.
And is that, for winterizing? Is that kind of the main reason?
Yeah, for winterized, for draining, it's, you want to get the water out. So when water freezes, it expands. You don't want it to crack anything.
Sure.
Also, when you're cleaning out the debris, it's the lowest point. You remove that and you hose it out. It comes out quick because it's the lowest point.
Okay, gotcha.
And that just needs to be hand tight, right? People don't really need
Exactly.
to break
Correct.
down on that thing, because I know there's been situations where you need like channel locks or something to get that thing off, and it's like, I don't think this thing is supposed to be on here that tight.
That hand tight should be all you need to do on that plug. And if you make the mistake of tightening it up, it's going to get worse over time, because once you tighten it up, it just seems to get tighter.
Yeah.
So it makes it even harder to get off.
Well, I had to ask that question. Otherwise, the pool service guys would probably be really mad at us if we didn't ask it. So appreciate you being good sports and answering it. We talked about a little bit, since it doesn't have a backwashing option, how do we clean, the cartridges?
Well, with cleaning the cartridges, you don't have a backwash, so you're going to have to take the filter apart. So you're going to turn the pump off. You're going to turn the breaker off to the pump, remove the band clamp, take the top portion of the filter off. Beforehand, open the air relief. That way you're going to drain the water in the filter down below the band level. And then you're going to remove the top of the tank. I generally try to hose down the cartridge a little bit while it's there with a garden hose, just to get some of the larger debris off, because it's going to be kind of heavy when you try to bring it out. At that point, depending on what type of filter it is, you're going to remove the top assembly, and you can remove each individual cartridge at that time. And careful in handling, I see a lot of people handle them a little rough, and they'll start trying to fold them in half, dragging them across the inside portion of the tank. And generally, you can just hose the cartridges off in cleaning. If at any point in time you think the cartridges need to be chemically treated, it's extremely important that if you're going to chemically treat a cartridge to clean it, that you degrease the cartridge first. Use some form of mild degreaser, a simple green, something to that nature, just to break any kind of grease or oils that may be on the cartridge. If you don't degrease it and you chemically treat them with a muriatic acid bath, 4-to-1 ratio is usually what they use to clean those with. If you expose any oils to the acids will crystallize oil. And if it's embedded on the cartridge, as soon as it hits the acid, it's going to crystallize it, and it's going to crystallize it and affix it to that cartridge permanently. And at that point, that area where that oil is becomes an ineffective cleaning surface. Water can't flow through it, so it doesn't do anything for you.
And I'm sure the muriatic acid probably doesn't need to be done every filter clean. Is that good? Maybe if there was a lot of algae in the pool at some point.
If you're getting short cycles on your filters and you've just been, rinsing the filters off with a garden hose, if you're getting short cycles, that would be a case where you would want to go in and do a possible acid clean, a 4-to-1 ratio or less, and do a chemical treatment on those cartridges to clean them. But I would not recommend chemically cleaning cartridges every time.
By short cycles, do you mean cleaning them more often?
Yes. If your pressures are continuously rising, let's say between cleanings you were getting 2 months where you had 10 psi rise, and now you're down to 4 weeks, it may be time to do a chemical cleaning on those.
Right. And we notice in your guys' manual talks about, spraying with a nozzle. We always use the high pressure nozzle. For anybody that hasn't done it before, at a, I think, 45-degree angle and working top down. Do you guys recommend that?
Yeah, but be real careful with the pressure you're using. If you get too high of pressure, you can actually blow a hole right through that material. I mean, it's pretty tough, but you can. I mean, you can cut wood with certain pressure cleaners. Make sure you don't have a high pressure.
Oh yeah.
Don't use a pressure
washer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like a hose.
Some of the nozzles on a garden hose can generate pretty decent and high pressure. So I'm really careful about. I'll use like the shower effect on it instead of a direct stream pressure. The nozzles that do the fan, they work very well. But yes, if you're using the sprayer on a garden hose, you do not want to use the jet spray where it's a single stream. A fan stream or a shower stream, and at a 45-degree angle to the cartridge instead of straight on. And working from the top down is the best when you're cleaning a cartridge. Any direct spray, as Frank said, any kind of direct spray is going to try to embed or push through the cartridge. So at a 45-degree angle, that is the best angle to rinse the cartridges.
Right. Thank you. And how important is it to make sure that the bands around the cartridges are intact? and not broken?
The bands around an element are basically there to try to make sure you're keeping the even spacing as a dirt load. It doesn't make it useless if they're broken off. It does over time affect the total effective filtration area, because what happens, that's basically just glued at the very peak of the cartridge pleats. So when that breaks off, what it'll end up wanting to do is, as you dirt load, if you get more dirt in one pleat than the other, it'll start collapsing some of your pleats. Looking to see if it's there is important. Doesn't mean the cartridge doesn't function. It just doesn't function to the level that it needs to if it was properly in place.
Right. And when do you think, some of those elements should be replaced, like the broken bands and pleats and stuff like that?
If they're all broken, you probably want to go ahead, when you put it back together, go ahead and order you some more cartridges to the next clean. You replace them. Our rule of thumb is, we say, cartridge should last you average 3 to 4 years before you have to replace them. If you do see people running their cartridges above that 10 psi pressure rise, you start seeing more pressure differential between the clean side and dirty side of the filter, which makes that area a point of contact for that band to be stressed more, and they want to fall off. So, if you're not properly maintaining that pressure within the filter, you can shorten that life. But if one of them is broken, I wouldn't worry about it. But if they're all come off, that's when I'd look at replacing it.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought up the fact of those bands around the cartridges. I have seen many homeowners clip those bands off thinking they're for packing.
Ooh.
Don't do
I
that.
have actually seen that happen. Homeowners, with all good intention, they think that is part of the packing, and they'll clip those bands off. And as Frank said, those bands help keep the pleats in line. Well, without those bands, if you clip them off, as you start to gain weight and debris, there's nothing to keep them straight. So they'll actually turn sideways, and the cartridge will collapse inside a tank. And then you're going to have bypass at the top where the cartridge is held in place.
Man, what a great way to confuse a technician.
Actually, that happens on our clean and clear single element, which is a coreless design. The cord cartridge won't collapse like that. But the Florida, the one that's primarily in Florida, the clean and clear coreless, does want to, once that happens, it slides down that center core and exposes some holes and allows debris.
Yep.
That's interesting.
And how often do you recommend, doing a filter clean?
I, like all the other medias, you want to make sure you're not, again, you can clean too soon, and then you sort of are, for cartridge, when you do that, you're really negating the purpose of oversizing, because you want to go between cleans for longer periods of time. But when you see that 8 to 10 psi pressure rises, would recommend cleaning. Do not clean on a time schedule unless you size your filter long enough to last your entire pool season. If you've been able to filter for an entire season, definitely at the end of the season, make sure you do clean those elements.
And with cartridge filters especially, you want to make sure you don't load up the cartridge filter. So with a variable speed pump, we recommend at installation, you choose an advanced speed on a variable speed pump. That way you're going to generate more flow and more pressure within the filter. I generally would speed up a variable speed pump until I have at least 10 pounds of pressure on the filter. I will note the RPM that pump is running at, generating the 10 pounds of pressure. Let's say it's 10 pounds of pressure on the filter and I'm running at 2,600 RPM. I will write that information down in the customer's notes and sometimes even put it right under the band on the back side of the filter with a Sharpie. I'll put that information there so it's there on site. If you're running the pump at a lower RPM, you're going to have very low filter pressure. You're still collecting a lot of debris in the filter, but you're loading the filter up at this point. When you come to there for service, turn the pump up to that 2,600 RPM and then look at your pressure. If you started at 10 and you're now at 20, it's time to clean the filter. If you're under that 10 PSI rise, you can get another week or another 2 weeks out of it. You just want to make sure you don't go above that pressure rise. That way you don't overload the filter. because that will cause damage to the cartridges.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very curious, what is the purpose of the air bleed screen? We've seen that question floating around a little bit online, and hoping that you could explain that to our listeners.
Okay, the air bleed screen that's in a cartridge filter is very similar to the air bleed that's in a sand or in a DE filter. What that screen allows, again, is it's usually located at the highest point in the filter we can get it, and it allows for any of the air that's gathering that may seep in slowly and gathers the top of the filter. It's the bypass that allows that to be sucked out and back into the pool with the pressure differential of the dirty side of the filter versus high side of the filter. So in all cases, it's a path for that water or that air to be removed automatically. Again, things that affect that: speed of water flowing and the pressure differential. If it comes up really, really slow, that is not as effective as if you're running a higher speed.
So if the screens are crushed or broken, it should be replaced, right?
Crushed doesn't bother me as much. If it's torn, yes. Again, pressure differential. That's how that's when you know it's truly working. It's basically you got higher pressure on the outside than on the inside, so it wants to collapse as it gets dirty.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as it's not torn, it still is. There's usually not a lot of stuff in the debris. If you're cleaning it, you may want to get anything like hair that's stuck on it off. But again, it allows the air to get out of there. I'd be more concerned if it was broken or torn.
Awesome. Well, I do want to point out again, too, because the lower tank bodies kind of match up. If you're replacing a DE with a cartridge, you need to take off the
yeah. Because one of the things
valve.
you want to make sure, because if you put a DE put a cartridge where DE was, you're now running the water backwards, and those cartridges are designed to handle flow going one direction. So when it goes the other direction, what it'll end up doing is it'll blow the pleats out and ruin your cartridge.
Yep, done that, 7 years ago. So I know I've seen from experience opening that back up and seeing those blown apart. I'm like, well, you can't. One of our guys that didn't know much about it, he installed one and he just put it on the backwash assembly. And then when we found out 6 months later, it was like, these are messed up. So you got to make sure to remove that backwash assembly if you're plumbing in a cartridge filter. Make sure the inlets and outlets are lined up correctly.
Yeah, and since we're talking about this, we had a lot of cartridge filters here in Arizona when we were doing them, and it just advised anybody new to the industry, have a toolbox and a kit full of, miscellaneous O-rings and pressure gauges and different things like that are going to be replaced more frequently. Maybe some cartridges, lube, nozzle, all these different things, gloves. That way, you're coming prepared, maybe even step by step. We had a guide that was A through Z on each step, and they were all prioritized in the right order. So however you do things, I think it's good to be prepared. You save time, you look professional. And yeah, I just wanted to put that out there since we were already talking about this, because that was something that, we really believed in, was trying to, figure out how to do something, taking the time to do it once, even if it was hours, but creating a process within that so that when you go out and do it, you're saving time, you're making more money, and it's a really good peace of mind for the business owner, the manager, and the technician. They feel empowered. They feel like they know what they're doing because it's all put in a system.
Very good idea, because it not only has all of your steps down so you've completed it, but it also can be used as an education tool for those that want to learn.
Yeah, it's a lot of accountability. You can't expect somebody to do something that they don't know how to do or it wasn't written down. It's best you are accountable for doing this job, and this is a list. They're all in priority order of how to get done. You signed off on it. So when you're taking pictures, that's another thing. We didn't really talk about that in this, but taking before pictures of what everything looked like at one point, because if you do need to make the recommendation of new cartridges or new manifold or air bleed or whatever it is that they might need, it's good that once you take that tank body off, that you have all the before photos so that you can send to the customer. And once you replace with new, get some new photos. So everybody should have a CRM in place so that the office and everybody knows, what's going on, so that that pool ever has issues, you can go into your database and see what the history looks like of this pool, what we've replaced, last time there was, 2 cartridges that the bands were broken and we're going to give it another 6 months. That, this time they're probably all broken and need to be replaced.
Right.
And that is a great idea. And a lot of times end users and even the pool professionals don't realize the manufacturer of this product, when they're called about issues, the first thing we try to do is gather as much information as possible. And the more information they have, i.e. pictures, serial numbers, these types of things make it very easy, or not very easy, makes it easier to diagnose issues and come to a resolution quicker if you have all those in place.
Yeah, totally agree with that. There's already enough problems out there now that we have the technology, especially with such good cameras on our phone. There's no reason why we can't take pictures of, serial numbers and all the different stuff that we need.
Yeah, because if a problem arises, you can get this data, this information to somebody like real time. Like, hey, look, I've sent you 2 pictures. This is before, this is after. What's the issue? And you get your answer right away. It's not like you have to go back out to the job site, 3-4 times. If you go ahead and do it when you're there, hey, makes everybody's life a lot easier, I think.
Agreed. So last thing I want to ask here is, what kind of cartridges does Pentair offer? What will we see in the field?
Pentair is offering, again, Pentair and Stay-Right's offerings. We for the Pentair brand, we have a Clean and Clear, which is a single element cartridge filter. We have our Clean and Clear RP, which basically is a raised port. It basically is just a different way of getting water into the filter. It's a tangential entry, a little bit better flow, a little bit better head loss. We have the Clean and Clear Plus, which is it's got 4 elements inside, higher capacity, longer run cycles in our Clean and Clear Plus models. In the Stay-Right, you have the System 3 Mod Media, which again is the large 2 elements inside that basically have the dual flow. It's got large square footage capabilities. You have the System 2, which is the PLM. Then you have the PosiClear RP and the Stay-Right brand as well. That's the models that are offered by Pentair.
Yeah. On the System 3, I wanted to ask, what do you recommend for unscrewing each one of those bolts? Because it's a lot of work sometimes. Is there any tricks to it?
There is a lot of work. It does require just hand tighten. So it is a time consuming process where you unscrew each one, get it long enough get it loose enough where you can remove it. Multi-Torx has a tool they came out with that basically has a little. You put it on a cordless drill that I've heard people say has been a time saver. Mm-hmm. But that's the only tool I'm aware of that's out there. We do promote that it's a toolless entry, so you don't have to have a tool to get in. But as you said, there's for the large one there's 8 clamps. For the smaller one there's 7. So you got to do that, looking like Popeye after doing a bunch of them because you got big forearms. But but Multi-Torx does have a tool that's out there that allows you to just plug it into a cordless drill.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much again for being on the podcast with us. We appreciate your time, and this is going to be great information for all the listeners to hear.
All right. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Hey, Pool Chasers. Thanks for checking out this episode. Did you know that each episode has its own page on our website? This is where you can find more information about the guest and episode topic, as well as all the resources that we discuss throughout the show. To get to the webpage, click the link below. Also below, you will find links to the sponsors of the show, as well as links to follow us on our social media channels. On our channels, you will find some of our favorite clips and bonus material. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our tag is Pool Chasers. We also have a Facebook group for the Pool Chasers community. Here you will find like-minded professionals all looking to make each other better. One last thing. If the episode has brought you value, please check out our Patreon page to support us. And if you could please rate and review the podcast, we would love to hear what your favorite topics are. Thank you for your time and your ear.
See you out there, Pool Chasers.